what's disruptive. Not incremental, but what's disruptive and what will be disruptive, what has been and what will be. Let me just give a brief introduction to our three new panelists. Dennis Cox comes from Ixia, is that how we pronounce it?
Yes, Ixia.
But his real claim to fame was Breaking Point, which he developed or co-founded in 2005, is that right? And he'll be talking maybe a little bit about that. He focuses on the security aspects of data, and big data is part of that. So he's looking at endpoint security and warehousing security. Raghu Ganti comes to us from the IBM Watson Research Center, where he specializes in wireless sensor networks and privacy and data mining. And he's got an interest in location also. Graduated from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in 2010, so very recently. And finally, Asad Zafar is our resident venture capitalist here on the panel. He's the co-CIO at Privateer Capital here in Austin and has invested in wireless startups and is interested in the wireless space, especially with location overtones. So I've asked Dennis and Raghu and Asad to give us a brief opening statement, after which we'll go ahead and open this up for broad questioning from you all and among the panelists. So Dennis, if you'd like.
Sure. Really what I want to talk about today is I'll be a little bit negative because I'm a security guy. And I've heard a lot of people talk about individual items. And in security, what we look for is the intersects. Because one guy really doesn't talk to the other guy that well. And there's always a problem at the intersect. One guy does something okay with the GPS, one guy does something good with the phone, another guy does something good with the accelerometer, and there's a problem between all three. And that's where we exploit. And we do really well at that. And I hope to God somebody develops a service that's not based on advertising using all this mobile data. Because I'm going to tell you, everybody's made their money in advertising. There are three big houses, and they've made it. Really, Vijay said it earlier, it's really service chaining and networking where this applies to. This is really good stuff for that. Think about it. The mobile data is collected originally to figure out where to put towers to give you better service and give you better coverage. Those things apply. What you don't want to see it happening for is advanced services that tell you, for example, I have a Windows phone, because I'm odd, and I have a Windows phone, and you go to Bing and it has local search, and I can go local search and it tells me where a nearby restaurant is. That's great. But worse yet, it tells me the Yelp review. Okay, so it tells me it's a good restaurant, a bad restaurant. Well, what's going to happen is it's going to tell you whether or not it's good or not on a Friday night. Then it's going to tell you what the waiter is and who's good. And someone mentioned maybe the wait time. But you're going to change the economics of things because you won't go there on Friday nights if that waiter's there, and you won't go there if it's busy. And that restaurant won't be able to sustain itself. You have to realize that stuff happens, and it happens over and over again, just as online shopping has done to bookstores, for example. And you also have to realize that there's privacy concerns with that too that no one's thinking about. In the past, all this data was stored, for better or worse, by the law enforcement. You have to get warrants, or at least you used to have to get warrants. You'd have to get warrants to that data, and you'd have to prove out the reason why you'd want to do that and what you want to get to. Now you're giving it to capitalist pigs. You've given this data to Facebook, you've given this data to Google, and he's buying up 5 houses in Palo Alto. He really doesn't give a shit about you. What he cares about is his money, okay? And you're giving it to him free of charge for convenience. And that's very scary. You have to realize that every company now is a big data company because they can sell your information. And you don't want that to happen. But you won't do it. Guys like me won't because we're 40. But guys that are 22 just really want to get that picture on Instagram. And they want to geotag it themselves. So there's a lot of dangers there. And so think about it and work with people around you to come up with this answer because it's scary. Facebook doesn't care about the law. It's just something that's in the way. Just remember that.
Okay. So, all right. So maybe I'll add to the negative sentiment over there, and basically pick up on saying that hey, many people know where I am right now. I mean, I can pull up the Texas Wireless Summit webpage. And everybody in the world knows I'm sitting right here in Austin in this particular room. Everybody knows that. And it's not just that. I mean, I can pick up on several public profiles of me or anybody in this room for that matter. And somebody said, how private are we? But my location is known to, I don't know, I mean, so many different people at so many different points of time. I think what is more interesting is really being able to say that tracking a person in real time is more of an issue, I would say, rather than knowing where you are exactly at this point. I mean, I can say, I think there was this website called pleaserobme.com, which there was this famous, story which goes about somebody from Hawaii, vacationing in Hawaii, put a Facebook status saying, "Oh, I'm enjoying my time at Hawaii beach," or whatever, right? And then there were these set of thieves who came by to their home, stripped the entire home, including the carpet in the home, happily walked out without any trouble at all, and all because of one Facebook status that the person is not at home. And this is the kind of things that are very it just makes me wonder, like, what's happening. Maybe what's happening in my home. Maybe I should have like a video camera sitting over here that talks to me of what is going on wrong with my home. But I don't think there is any way. This is more like a very disruptive statement that I want to make. Is that I don't think there is any way that you can hide your location. It could be coming from your cell phone provider, tracking you using your cell phone. It could be coming from my own details, where I didn't give any permission to Texas Wireless Summit to put up my information on the web page. So do I have? Basically, there is the utility versus privacy trade-off is very glaring in location as such. I think with that, I think everything else people have covered. So maybe I'll let this negative sentiment be around for a while.
Cheer us up.
Sure. So I want to make a couple of points here, and I want to take a more of a macro picture in the way. So we want to talk about where the industry is heading, but where were we when big data wasn't there? What was done? It was sampling. We'll take sample of data, we'll do some sort of regression, and we'll figure out a relationship. What was the issue with it? Because the sample was biased, and we'll get a macro picture of it, not detail level picture, subcategories, intricacies. And big data solved that problem. You take all the data, and you can get detailed information, intricacies, delicate relationships you can figure out. Big data help us figure out what the relationship is, but it still hasn't answered one major problem. Why is the relationship there? I can figure out if there's a consumer walking in, if I'm a retailer, and a consumer is walking in and is a regular customer, what his behavior is. But what about bringing a next consumer here who's never been in my store? I'll give you a good stat. Groupon, its hit rate on its advertisement is less than 1%. Talk about target advertisement. Less than 1% hit rate on its target advertisements campaigns. So I think personally, one big ideology or one big opportunity is figuring out why is the relationship there. The second big thing that I want to focus on is, I think there was a slide before on defining big data. So we had volume, we have a lot of data. We have to manage a lot of data, and there's a lot of progress being made. New data warehouses has been built, et cetera, et cetera. Velocity, CPU power, cut down latencies. New architectures have been come up. A lot of new ideas, a lot of themes out there. Variety. I want both structured data, unstructured data, et cetera. And the fourth major theme is veracity, accuracy problem, and that's where Ramsey touched base on. I think the next big opportunity is figuring out the accuracy of the data, figuring out the delicacies, intricacies of those relationships. It has huge impact in a number of industries, agriculture, retail. Just think about retail. It's in US, it's a $3.5 trillion industry. Every year there are in US $350 billion coupons. 99% of those are still paper. 1% is media. Look at the opportunity. But yet, with our current system, GPS as is very, very difficult to figure out where exactly the consumer is up to an inches, where exactly my tractor is up to an inches. I think there's a huge, huge opportunity in those industries.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Asad. I'll start the questioning off with maybe a factual question. Our smartphones are able to locate our position, and of course the providers of those phones, whether it be a Google platform or an Android platform or an Apple platform, they know where we are. But they've also got licensees, customers to whom they sell these data. How pervasive is the practice of selling our data? How many of the applications running on our iPhones or our Android phones are data cognizant? And so how many other companies out there have our data? Or is it stovepiped in Facebook, in Google, and Apple? I can ask Ramsey this and maybe Dennis too.
Sure. My answer to that would be everybody has your data. Let's go through AT&T. AT&T, we have our Apple phone, or there's one guy with Windows phone, but they can figure me out anywhere. But I got my iPhone or I got my Android, so they know where I am. And then I'm going to go to the B. I'm going to go to the tower. So Ericsson knows where I am, because Ericsson owns a tower and they're going to do diagnostics on it. Huawei knows where it is, which is in China, by the way. So they know where you are too. And then it comes back over. Not to say that's a bad thing. Just now you've got, we've got our data located in California. We've got our data located in Dallas. We've got it located in Stockholm, where Ericsson is. And we've got our data located in Shanghai, where Huawei is, right? It's all over the place. That's the B. And then I go through my B and I go to diameter, all right? So I go to my MME. And so I have my vendor there, and that's Juniper. Juniper's based in Santa Clara. They have it as well. It's great. And I keep going through my network, and every piece of my network goes through there. Then I go through a probe, like a tech probe. And tech looks at my probe to look up voice quality. They have all that location data as well. So everybody along that path has their own access to that data. So there's no licensee involved there. They're just equipment manufacturers. Now let's add licensees on top of that. It gets pretty complicated pretty quick.
In terms of the smartphone world, depending on the platform, it can be a bit of a wild west. So Apple is very locked down, and if you submit an app to the Apple Store, it disappears into their echelons for a while, and it may be accepted or rejected. Interestingly, there's been evidence in the past that sometimes they reject stuff, and then magically it becomes part of Apple stuff in the future. Please don't sue me. And on the flip side, Google is an extremely open platform. So the stuff I showed you there, I can't code that up on Apple, because I on an Apple device, I cannot access the information I need to access to do that. So I develop on Google. But the flip side is, because it's such a flexible platform, it is straightforward to do malicious stuff. And it's down to the users, really, to carefully read the information that's presented to them, the typical kind of boring stuff. So you've got this cool-looking app that you want to play with, you press go, and you're presented with all this information that says, this app is going to read your phone contact book list. This app is able to use your course location. This app is able to use your fine location. This app is able to access the internet. And you're supposed to look at this list and go, I just wanted to play solitaire. And that's probably, at that point, you go, this is a bad solitaire app. But there's a lot of it is on the end user. There are apps that you should definitely install, like Lookout and other apps that are acting as your virus checker, I suppose, in the smartphone world. But we are racing along with technology. Security is always left to last, and yes, it's
so for the security part, it's been overcome by events. I mean, you're all existence proofs up here. You're all wringing your hands and using your iPhones, right, or your smartphones. So it's an existence proof of convenience trumping security. Asad, what about the promise of location-based services? Do you really think they've delivered on the hype over the last couple of years? Do you think there are going to be breakthroughs going forward that will ultimately deliver on the hype, or will people simply become fed up with getting fed with adverts?
Yeah, so I think one big idea was mobile advertisement, right? So if you look at the mobile advertisement market right now, between Google, Yahoo, and Apple, they have more than 50% of the market share right now. And then you've got Millennial Media and then JumpTap, which they just merged. They have almost 30% of the market share. So it's a very, very, very competitive market at this point. In fact, JumpTap and Millennium Media merged a couple months ago, and I know both the companies pretty well, because it was just very, very, very competitive to exist there in the market.
Wait, you're saying there are few players, yet it's competitive?
Because Google, you're going after Google, you're going after Apple, you're going after Yahoo. and they've got big muscles out there. By the way, if you look at Google or Apple, they bought those companies back in 2009 and 2010. Apple bought Quattro in 2009. Google bought AdMob in 2010. So they did these acquisitions 3-4 years ago, and now they're big muscles. So you're going to go after very, very, very strong big muscles. So you better be ready to compete. And it's very, very tough to compete in general mobile advertisement market. Now, if you take a step forward, there are areas like, for example, retail space, which I talked about. Retail, if you are a retailer, you want to price discriminate. You want to price discriminate right at the shelf. You want to give a different price to the consumer depending upon his behavior, his features, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the opportunity is. It's a $3.5 trillion market. There are 350 billion coupons every year. But the opportunity, again, the issues there are, a lot of money in the last couple of years have gone, even in that space. So you've got Euclid, Shopkick, just tons and tons of money have gone in this space. And the idea is that the questions that people are asking, number one is, how accurate is the data? Is the GPS accurate? So I might be in the next store, but I might be getting coupons coming from this store. How accurate is this? Secondly, the idea, I think privacy slowly and steadily is becoming a big issue. Push versus pull technology. Google AdWords. Hey, should I ask for coupons or should those be forced on me? So that's another idea. I think the opportunity where I see is the low energy Bluetooth technology where I can ask for it. So I can go to a shelf and I have 5 different brands there and I can say, I'm looking for a detergent. And can the brands bid for me in real time? And then the real brands can bid on me and I can select it. Low energy Bluetooth technology, I think there's a huge future there.
Let me open it up to the audience for questions.
One, thank you. I didn't hear anybody really comment about the problem or the possibility of somebody disassociating you from your data. And in the example with the extended chain can really create a mess. And then the counterfactual to some of the things that were said, it maybe can be more optimistic, is that there is a possibility that someone might steal your all's identity and do more with it than you have.
I mean, really, no, it more comes down to classification, if you think about it that way. So let's say that I'm a Texan, so I like to fish, and I like to drive cars, I drink beer, et cetera. And let's say I take this one route to work every day, and there's a dozen people that take that route, and they all are serial killers. Am I a serial killer? Is that what the data showed? That's really what it gets down to, is if everybody's looking at that data, it all depends on that person's view on that data. Let's take a common one that happens all the time to celebrities, right? So you got a lady at the phone company, and she works there, and she figures out that she wants to find the phone number to Brad Pitt. She types in his phone number and goes, oh, this is really exciting. I've got Brad Pitt's number. Oh, I know his locations. He's over here. I'm going to sell it to a paparazzi, right? Very standard, no big deal. But then let's say she gets curious about her boss. She types in the phone number of her boss and notices he went to the local head shop down the street. And she goes, ooh, and she tells everybody at work he's a drug addict. That's what big data causes. It's that privacy concern there. It's that thing. Now, of course, these are stretched truth examples, right? They're far, far between, but they do happen quite often. The paparazzi one is always happening here in America, right? That's a pretty common technique. And everybody's curious about their boss, and people are curious about their neighbors, and people do look them up. Facebook, everybody goes back and they query people they just saw. I wonder what she's like or what he's like. That's where it comes to, and when people associate with another person or another person's behavior based on your behavior. To me, that's what it's scary.
The evidence shows, though, Dennis, that our mobility traces are quite unique. With 4 randomly chosen spatiotemporal points, I can uniquely identify 95% of people, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you and those malefactors
Yeah.
are not probably going to be confused too often. And another thing I comment, I mean, you've reminded us several times now, be aware of this, make sure it's on your mind, et cetera, but that's not a solution.
No, it's
right? Awareness, is it just that you have a good feeling that you're the sophisticated type that knows that you're being tracked and still willingly acts, allows yourself to be tracked? Is there anything concrete we can do, say, from unplugging from our devices?
Vote for different people, I guess. Change the laws.
You're looking for a legal...
Well, for example, if someone keeps that data for a year, that's understandable. Law enforcement wants that data. but is it fair to Facebook to have that data? I should opt in. There was one man mentioned up here, he says, well, I should be able to sell my location. Well, it's kind of tough to do, but you should be able to opt out of those locations, location history. Trust me, I'm going to go right there and check out my browser and figure out where I've been, and then I'm going to forget where you all been. No, so.
Well, opting out is currently available in many of these platforms.
It is.
It's just you don't get to opt out and keep the convenience.
I totally agree with you.
That's exactly it. I ditched a slide on exactly this. If you try to opt out of Wi-Fi and cell phone positioning in your Android phone, then you can't have it both ways. You either are able to access the service and you must tick OK on the disclaimer box that says I'm going to anonymously sniff your data all the time, even when you're not running GPS, all this kind of stuff. If you decline it, you go back out and the box is unticked. So you cannot access the potentially life-saving technology of Wi-Fi and cellular positioning unless you opt in to sharing anonymized data.
Yeah.
Raghu, you mentioned the utility privacy trade-off, and this is not just one that concerns big data or wireless. In fact, it's more pervasive than that. What do you know about that? What can you say more abstractly?
Well, I think I can probably comment on the location aspects of it because that's what I've primarily worked in. So I think one thing that at least I observe in location is that there's a lot of portions of location. When I speak of location, it is more like location traces of myself. There's a lot of portions of location traces that I don't really care about, and I'm happy that I share it with other people. And I presume that's common with a lot of people over here. I mean, let's say, for example, how do I go from work to home? I mean, that's typically, I think, many people can just guess by just punching the numbers in Google Map, and they'll be able to find out. But it is the portions where I really care about could be, I don't want the world to know, where I'm vacationing, for example. I want that portion, that part to be kept secret. So, or maybe kept private to only a certain set of people. So that's where somehow being able to say suppress the data in portions, especially for location traces, becomes very important. And now I really don't know what the solution for doing that is, because we've explored different ways of suppressing that portions of the location. But nothing really works. And there are these techniques called spatial cloaking, where you can just specify regions, say, I don't want to be tracked in this region. And I think Google has this one notion of cutting off portions of your traces towards the end, but that doesn't really buy you anything.
We don't anonymize now. Right?
And it's not only under your control. I mean, I can give you an example where, let's say, taxis are now, they track locations continuously. So if I sit in a taxi and if I know, if somebody else knows that, hey, this guy lives far away he's like some millionaire, not that I am, but, he's still living far away, but he takes his taxi, and then somehow somebody gets access to the taxi cab data, and they're able to figure out that this guy took the taxi on so-and-so day, and this is a common thing that keeps happening. So how do I control that? So that is why I started off with a very negative sentiment of saying, how do I really control access to location data across this varied set of sources of data, which may not be in my control. It's not just my cell phone that is tracking me. It is so many other pieces of location data that track me. It's like cars, for example, track me, OnStar devices, and so on.
Which seems to speak against the idea of cloaking. I mean, maybe
Exactly.
you can cloak with one company, but pan-company cloaking sounds to me like John Lennon's Imagine song. He's got the microphone now. I'll pass it to you right now.
Oh, sure. Hello? Is this on?
Should be, but
See a red light.
I see a red light.
I can speak up. Aren't we being a little bit sort of naive at some level? I mean, the reality is this is just another incantation of our security being gone for a long time. I mean, it's called the white pages. I mean, you can go from the white page, white pages through, look at the nature of the internet, browsing, cookies, caching. I mean, come on. Sniffers, we've been doing this 30 years. I mean, we're talking about, there's nothing really new here except for maybe the instantaneous mobility, which gets back to the interesting conversation here about making big data real time and real-time decisions and closing the window. So one of the things, I would just comment, the thing we need most of all is something that would actually simplify for the user the policies around eliminating, like, for example, your cache in your browser, simplifying security in your home, for example, making it easy. It's all about the simplification and putting those tools in the hands of the user, so that we can push a button and delete our cache automatically from Google Maps. I mean, simplifying and policy-based. I mean, it's kind of the same old story, right? My question is around. I mean, we did some work back years ago for the NSA doing large-scale, high-order multidimensional analysis where we did like 36 dimensions of synthetic parameters for cognitive network intrusion detection, for example, right? And this has been around for years. But I'm curious, now that we have more computational capacity and we have more sources of data, maybe even, I know you've done some work in security from a perimeter protection, have we made any progress in that area from big data meets network data meets consumer data? Because the bad guys are really an anomaly, right? There's only a few folks out there that are doing it, right? And we just need to be able to detect and alert in that instance. But it needs to be a day zero alert versus a day one alert with signatures. So, long-winded question.
Has big data improved security by allowing us to...
Where are we?
Yeah, I think it has quite a bit. It definitely has in terms of, someone mentioned where you are at location, so badge access, door access, where you were. A lot of companies have the ability to delete your mail off your cell phone when you lose it, and they can track that in real time. So you're separated from your phone, you can now delete that. It's pretty cool. It's a big improvement on security and your rights. There's also a big improvement, especially when you mentioned day zero, in terms of tracking people down that commit those acts, right? So it makes prosecution a little bit easier as you can trace things through the network. And now that we have this big data and people are sampling the data, you can find the guy in Tanzania or Uzbekistan or Estonia or the Bronx that did it. So
I think the classic example is the Boston bombing. Suspects were caught because of mobility traces.
The other thing is that technology is just snowballing. So, like, Facebook began as quite a simple way to ping people inside just one university. Gmail started in whatever it was, 2004, as a way to just send a message to somebody you know and love. Today, it tracks your every movement, and I, specialist on this, I didn't know about that till an astrophysicist came up to me a few days ago, because I gave a talk on local radio station about this kind of stuff and was like, after your talk I was having to play it, and that made my jaw drop. And God knows how long ago I flicked a tick box on my phone and enabled that, and I'd forgotten. And if anyone should know about that, it's me. And the point is that everything is snowballing, and so much is being protected by one password, and passwords aren't secure, people reuse passwords. I do not yet have a phone with a fingerprint scan, so I have loads of stuff logged in automatically on my phone. I don't keep typing in my Facebook password, my Gmail password, my Twitter password. So I have one little pattern swipe that unlocks all of those things. And the whole point of 12-digit alphanumeric passwords has gone out the window. Someone shoulder surfs me, bops you on the back of my head, takes my phone off me, and they've got my Facebook, my Gmail, my Twitter till I wake up. So it's more to do with how it's all snowballed than what each individual little piece means. And we race through so the BLE security stuff, like I genuinely fear how many people might start naively implementing BLEs with tiny URL web links and expose themselves to potentially hugely embarrassing spam stuff that could close a small store. So it's more about snowballing than individual moments of what's going on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Dennis. And from some of the previous comments, my reaction is the Borg has arrived. I mean, any resistance is futile, which scares a lot out of me. But so I will invite comments from a different angle. I mean, in today's presentations and in many other presentations, it seems that there is an implicit assumption that advertising is the way to go, we will continue that way, and that there will be no modification. The situation is like that, and we accept as it goes. And I wonder whether, I, for one, have a negative reaction when I am overly targeted. Even today, in simple things like Google, occasionally I accept. If I go and buy something that I like and they send a little hint, it's okay. But if I feel that I am overly targeted, my reaction is absolutely negative. And I invite something about that. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe people of my generation will react that way. or will be a backlash in which people, I mean, I'm going back to the location piece, right? I mean, yes, you target me because you know exactly where I am. The hell out, I get the hell out of here, okay? Questions, I mean, that's a question for the panel.
Maybe how can we be more nuanced in our targeting, because the targeting isn't going to stop. That's driving a lot of this. How can we be more stylish in how we target? You have an answer for that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's on.
Well, I think, I'm not saying, okay, I won't say it's generational, but a lot of people who they are growing up in digital world and digital age, they don't really care. We have taught them to not care. We are guilty of it. Technologists, scientists. It's juvenile for us too. It's a juvenile world. But also, I will say, they will get there. They will know how happy you are to see the color of what you're wearing. And they will not hit you with 20 advertisements. They will hit you with one that you really like and you will buy. And it's coming. And when we talk about the big data, emotional data is factored out. And the reason for it, as he said, Gmail didn't start it to pick our emotion, neither Facebook, neither of those platforms. They start for something else, totally unrelated. Facebook was a dating platform. So when you look at your question, they will get there. It's coming. It's going to be faster than you think. The fingerprints you put in, yeah, it's going to come. I had the question, besides answering you, sorry, interrupting all of you guys, is about Ramsey and I talked earlier. And it touches the earlier panel, if it's okay with you, and some of latest, this one. It was about the Facebook. We know millions of people there on the Facebook are very young people. They went in and signed up. They lied to Facebook. Facebook knew they lied. They accept them. We know Google has 37 ways to know who you are. They say we want to verify you're not a thief, but, well, that's another question to be answered. Facebook also has a way to know who you are. You use AT&T, they are in touch with AT&T data. You use Microsoft, they know about Microsoft data. And so a couple days ago, or last week, I have a jet lag still, I think it was last week, that Facebook changed the policy on the age. They said, go ahead. And the reason for that, I want you guys to help me out. I'm just questioning this. Possibly is a corrupted data, a big data unstructured came to them with millions of young kids. They sign up, and now they have to clean it up because it's important to them to know how old those kids are. In a way, they know because they know this is my dad, my family, your cousins. They have a way to figure out, hey, you might be 15, even though you said you're 19, because you hang out with lots of 15-years-old kids. So my question is, how they're going to do it? I mean, is a way ever they would be, accuracy of that data will get in a place, or it'd be always 20% of data in Facebook, not a Google, Facebook specifically, that is really not presenting the age of the people they are in. And has to do with the policy change in California. They said you have to erase the data for the people that are under age 20. So I'm interested to know about that part if you guys have a knowledge on it. Appreciate it.
I believe the question is, do we think that we can use big data to infer if people are lying and infer things about their ages? Well, there's a really interesting TED Talk. I wish I could remember the name of the guy. A study that showed that things like TripAdvisor is plagued with these problems where people just put fake reviews on. The people who own the hotels go and pretend to be people. And brilliant piece of very simple machine learning, a technique called naive Bayesian classifier. It's actually it's much simpler than its cool name sounds. And you can apply this very simple trick, and you look for particular single words together, and triple words. And the general gist is that when somebody is lying, they're trying to convince themselves as much as the other person. So someone says I a lot more when they're lying. It's as if they're trying to put themselves in the same position. So if I give a real review of AT&T Conference Center, I will describe facts. Food really good, room really big, loved it, close to where I was going. Someone who's lying might typically go, I found the food to be excellent, and I really like the fact that the rooms are so big. And there's these ways of looking at little slips people give away to detect when they've written text that's full of lies or not. So there are certainly ways of using machine learning, never mind big data analysis, to try to pick up if someone is lying or not. And then on the big data side, I suspect, based on things like Facebook shares, Facebook likes, probably the style of language on the status updates, I bet very strongly that there's a strong correlation between your age and the number of status updates, or at least maybe your mental age and your number of status updates. And I'm as guilty as that as anyone. But I would put money on it that it is possible to start to determine if you think somebody is in a certain age category based on their usage of Facebook. Yes.
And there's already a lot of work getting done right now, especially in the area of semantic analysis. What were your emotions like to predict from your language, from your Twitter feeds, from your Facebook feeds? Hey, what's the emotion of this person like? And to make the judgment that Ramsey talked about.
I'd like to engage pair with a question. Okay, let's, well, I'll ask my question first. I claimed it.
Hey, I was enjoying myself fine.
Per, I was very much taken with your notion of proof of location, and that this is going to be integral to the way that we do business going forward, that we'll have to prove our location as much as other parts of our identity. Do you imagine a cottage industry arising where, say, a disgruntled professor who wasn't given tenure decides to create a business where he can offer people false proofs of location? And it's not so much a question of whether he can do it or not, it's more a question of scale. He can invest enormous energy in this because he can scale it up and sell on the black market, such that Asad could contact this professor and say, I would like to have been here during this interval of time. Can you generate that for me? Is that a worry of yours?
That was my question.
Ah.
That way, but essentially, how is it that you know, just because the GPS receiver says the person's there, how do you know the person is next to that GPS receiver? Maybe this professor has, a bunch of GPS receivers all over the world, and they can pretend they're with this person who really isn't.
It's not such a question of technique, because I'm promising you that if this professor had the will, he could come up with some fairly convincing.
Count me in.
You've already got tenure.
I think that's coming, actually. The application I worry about is this financial trading. That's now timed. And the resolution of that timing of whose trade got there first is getting finer and finer and finer. And the time is just estimated based on GPS, just a regular GPS. So that would be a very, what did they used to call this? This has a history that goes back to the beginning of the century. I forget who it was, horse races or something like that, that they would delay the call of the horse race back at the bookies.
Sure, this is the movie The Sting.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Great movie, Robert Redford.
So maybe one solution there is you do a combination of a lot of things. So it's not just your cell phone, but your watch. Now you've got watches which have, you can put chip in there, we can tell you where exactly you are, and your password. So 3 or 4 things, I don't know.
Yeah. Picking up on my colleague's point here, I spent quite a bit of time with PayPal. And PayPal, depending if it's a $1.99 transaction, they don't check much. They're good, they'll take the risk. $50, they start to insist on a couple of items. And so location only is, an element in that stack. I don't think it can sit there by itself. But even so, we want to make the attack expensive. And so that's the idea behind the Leos and the Iridiums. And even that is parameterable in that if you're buying a car, not only will I check your location at the moment we sit down, I'll check just before we're done, 5-10 minutes later. And I think I can lock it down pretty good. But the principle underlying your question is true. Location-based security doesn't offer anything if the attacker has the same location you do. Then it has to come from, the other factors.
You are complicit in that. There were some hands over here.
Maybe radio navigation security could be based on more than just one signal, right? You could have a sensor of agile. So I'm like one way to defeat just GPS-based secure location. Even if you just grab the raw samples, you could generate a false location from a simulator, right? And you could verify that it was somewhere. You couldn't verify that it was at the right location. But what if you made the attacker have to spoof all the signals in the vicinity, and then that makes the attack harder? And then you can verify, well, there was a cell phone signal here, there was a FM radio signal here, there was so forth.
But you're thinking only at you're not thinking of security because you're thinking only at the RF level. So let's take that RF signal back. It goes through an SGW, it goes through a GDP tunnel, and in there is the ID of your location, your longitude and latitude. That's how it works in the telephone network, right? What about that spot? That spot's a lot easier to get to. A $9 an hour telephone tech can get it. So you don't have to go to these extreme lengths. It's it's every chain, right? Every chain that matters.
But I mean, that point's very valid for some very high security assets, like UAVs flying around the sky, stopping someone smacking it into a building and stuff.
Sure.
And that's the exact principle behind NavSop. So it is indeed a seriously difficult undertaking to start spoofing medium wave radio, VHF FM radio, DAB digital radio, DVB-T radio, 2G GSM, 3G GSM, Wi-Fi, 4G mobile, and ADS-B from downlink from aircraft. And the point about NavSop learning was that it actually checks things like, do these signals all come from the same place? So for a very high value asset, like in the defense industry, then the more the merrier. And that's the whole point behind sensor fusion. Make it so hard for them to spoof you that they will stop worrying about it and try doing something else like buying bazookas. But the problem was the one-trick pony of civilian GPS and the fact that you can order a GPS simulator on the internet today and it will arrive in 10 days and you can put a coat hanger in the front of it and broadcast GPS. So I think the point, though, is it's similar to two-step authentication and things. But this point is absolutely right, and it comes back to my point before about all my beautiful, long, complicated passwords are actually controllable by watching me swipe my thumb across my smartphone. You can't get the password out, but you can access stuff while I'm in a difficult situation. So there's multiple...
Bump on your head. Bill, you have...
GPS only, right? When you do not with GPS only, you can have your cell tower track you, you can have Wi-Fi tracking. So there's just so many different ways of getting location. It need not be GPS only.
We'll take one more question for the panel.
So, asking the security guy, or maybe all of you, we're talking a lot, Edward Snowden, right, the leaker, right, spend a lot of time talking about how he exposed what the government was doing to us, but the other thing he also exposed was what one guy could do to the government. And that would be true inside of Google or Yahoo or, so we spent some time talking about whether Google was evil, but Google doesn't really have to be evil. You just need one guy. And I'm curious from a security perspective, does anybody know whether once you've got the employee badge and you're inside the company, well, is it free reign in there inside of Google's offices or Yahoo's or Facebook's? What sort of security do they have to prevent, considering the government apparently let Edward Snowden run free reign all over the place? Is Google better at that than our government, or does anyone know?
Typical audit logs usually help you, right? You have to have a good audit system. A person calls in with a phone number and they have trouble. You make sure they only search for that phone number, right? This is typical stuff. As for Edward Snowden, all he did is move to Russia, and I think any one of us can do that. Nothing changed, right? He moved to Russia, and that's it. So I don't think he makes a difference. I don't think he makes a difference to Google, because as Todd pointed out to me, I'm not willing to give up that convenience, no matter what they put on the newspaper. So,
let's thank our panelists. It's been a great session. We'll now be breaking for the Mobile Monday session. And before we break for Mobile Monday, I'd like to let you know that one of the vendors just outside is going to be offering a free iPad or was it an iPod? And if you'll leave your business card with them, they'll be doing a selection just afterward, and it's just outside this door to your left, and we'll give away one of those free as we return from the Mobile Monday. We will return at 3:50.
And now we want to talk about your taxes. Since we've established.
Yeah.
Do you have a minute?
Give me two.